Hi, I'm Dr. Mitch Harlan, and welcome to the Truth Talks podcast. Boy, today I have a guest on my show that has a pretty intense story. As a matter of fact, I would say that many of us have thought about being in his situation. We all pray that we're not. But in the event that you end up there, I think that this guest is really going to shed a whole bunch of light on exactly what we might do in that situation. So I'm going to introduce everyone to Stephen Willeford. Stephen, how are you?
I'm doing excellent today. It's a beautiful day here in Texas.
There's a thing I always like to kind of talk about, what I might do in this situation. But let me open this up with exactly what happened in this situation. So, Stephen Willeford, he's a national spokesman for the Gun Owners of America and author of the recent book, A Town Called Sutherland Springs, Faith and Heroism Through Tragedy, which is available on Amazon. On November 5th, 2017, at the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, Texas, a local man, Devin Kelly, shot and killed 26 people and wounded 22 others. Kelly was shot and wounded by Stephen Willeford, then eventually killed himself in a car chase or after the car chase. It is the deadliest mass shooting in Texas history. Here's what I find a little bit interesting. In 2021, a federal judge ruled that the federal government was negligent and awarded victims and family members near $250 million. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Willeford confronted Devin Kelly, trading fire. He struck Kelly in two places, then led to the chase in which Kelly ended up committing suicide, taking his own life. Stephen, man, we've all been, or at least if you have a gun, concealed carry, of which I do. We had a bad shooting out here in a grocery store, and I often think about, man, what the hell would I do? Lead us through that story.
Well, so November 5th, 2017, I actually stayed home from church. Normally, I would be going to church about 40 miles away from my hometown. But that day I decided to stay home from church because I was going to start an on-call where I worked as a maintenance plumber at a major metropolitan hospital. And I decided I would get some rest because I was going to do 20 to 30 extra hours all during the night for that week. And my wife said, well, if you're not going to go to church, I'm going to go help finish Rachel's house. And Rachel was my middle daughter, and she was pregnant with my very first grandbaby. And her and her husband were living with us, and we were building her home by ourselves. And so my wife's an amazing person. She decided that she would tape and float the walls herself. And so she read a book on how to do it, and she was doing it. And she went over to my daughter Rachel's house, it was about 5 miles away. And I was hanging out in my bedroom, checking my messages with my phone and stuff. And my older daughter had moved back in the house with us because she was engaged to be married. And she didn't want to sign another apartment lease that she'd be stuck with when she got married. So she moved back in with us also. We talk about the boomerang kids. Uh, and she moved back in with us. And if you're going to stay at my house rent free, you're going to do chores. So that morning, she was up washing dishes and cleaning the house. And she came into my bedroom and said, Dad, doesn't that sound like gunfire? And right away, your mind tries to make something normal out of something that is very abnormal. And I thought it was someone tapping at the window. And she said, no, come into the other room. It's louder there. And I went into the other room. It was gunfire. I told her so. I ran to my safe. She ran outside, jumped in her car, and drove up the block to find out what was going on. I opened up my safe, and if you have a choice of a rifle or a pistol, always choose a rifle. I grabbed an AR-15 that I had hand built myself for competition. And I grabbed a magazine and popped open a box of ammunition and grabbed a handful, sticking it in the magazine. And I called my wife and said, where are you at? She said, I'm at Rachel's house, taping and floating walls. What's going on? She could hear the panic in my voice. And I said, someone is shooting up the Baptist church. And I said, stay where you're at. And she said, don't go over there. I hung up the phone and I ran for the door. And my daughter burst in the door and said, Dad, there's a guy in black tactical gear shooting up the church. I said, "Did you call 911?" She said, "I did. They're aware of it." So right away, what that told me is police are coming, and they're coming fast and hard, and they're coming to a mass shooting. And I feared the police more than I did the shooter himself. But I knew Sutherland Springs were a little small community in the middle of nowhere. And there's no telling how long it would take the police to get there. And so I started running out the door and across the street. My daughter followed me. And I said, "Go back in the house and load another magazine. I may need it." And not that I really believed that she could go in and load a full magazine and come across the street with a magazine in her hand and give it to me in a gunfight. But I didn't want her to follow me over there. I didn't want her to be a distraction. He already had too many people that I cared deeply about. And I didn't want her to follow me over there. And I certainly didn't want her to see me if I failed. She would have run to my side. And she would have ended up getting killed because she ran to my side. So I sent her back in the house to do busy work. And I ran across the street. I didn't have shoes on. They now call me the Barefoot Defender. And people say, "Really, you didn't put shoes on?" I said, "You're lucky I had pants on." Because the gunfire that I knew was happening, and it was aimed at someone I cared about and meant for someone. So I ran across the street with the essentials. I had my gun. And halfways across the street, I truly believe that the Holy Spirit took over because I was thinking more clearly than I ever had in my life. And yet I yelled out. And yelling out is not what you would think of doing to give away your element of surprise. But halfway across the street, I yelled out. Inside the church, he shot Julie Workman through the breast and then skipped one off the concrete into her leg. And then he shot Chris Workman in the back. Chris was the praise ministry leader of the church. And he was shooting through the pews and he hit Chris in the back, instantly paralyzing Chris from the waist down. And Chris said he stood over him and he pointed the pistol directly at Chris. Chris said, "I thought I was going to meet Jesus." What he had been doing is he would shoot someone with his rifle, and then it would stand over him and yell, "Shut up," and pull the trigger and shoot him point blank range in the head with a pistol. Well, the moment I yelled out, he was pointing his pistol at Chris. And Chris heard me yell. And that must have been a really loud yell because it was 50 yards away through the walls of a church building that had been riddled with gunfire. But he heard me yell out, and apparently so did the murderer. And I don't mention his name for reasons I don't want to give him what he wanted.
Yep.
The moment I yelled out, he dropped his rifle in the church and came out of the church shooting at me with a pistol. And he took a few shots at me. I ran behind a truck for cover. He had on Class 3 body armor and a ballistic bulletproof helmet. And he hit the truck in front of me, shattered the windshield of the car behind me, and he hit the house behind me. I hit him in the left chest. I hit him in the abdomen. Both of those stopped by the body armor. And at that moment, he stopped shooting at me for a moment and ran for his vehicle, which was sitting in the middle of the street with the engine running and the driver's side door open. I came up over the hood of a pickup truck, and when he turned to his side to get into his vehicle, I saw where the plates has a front plate and a back plate, and it didn't have a plate in the side. I put one high in his side, and I put one in his legs. He was still able to get in the vehicle, slammed the door, and he put 2 rounds through the side window, and I saw the glass open up and start falling from those holes. I couldn't see his head from the reflection of the sun, but I put it around where I perceived his head to be. It split right underneath the helmet across his forehead. And he accelerated. He wanted out at that moment. He accelerated. He turned the corner, and he was running as fast as he could. By the time I got in the middle of the street, he was about 150 yards away. I put one through the back windshield. It shattered the back windshield. It went through the driver's side seat and hit him right of the left shoulder blade. He topped the hill and out of sight. And I'm standing in the middle of the street thinking, it can't end this way. He's getting away. And I looked off to my left, and there was a pickup truck stopped at the stop sign with a young man with a phone to his head. And I ran over. I'd never met Johnny before in my life. And I tapped on the window and said, that guy just shot up the Baptist church and we have to stop him. Every sane person in this world would have just jammed on the gas and left me standing there at the stop sign. But this is Texas we're talking about. We're not known for sanity. The next thing I heard were the locks come open. I climbed up in the cab with a long, tall Texan, white Western hat, toothpick hanging out of his mouth, a longhorn skull tattooed in the middle of his neck, and the horns go up underneath his ears. And Johnny Langendorf accelerated, turned the corner, and started chasing as fast as that Dodge truck would run. We were splitting cars and stuff, and something told me, check your magazine. And I dropped the magazine. I looked, I had one round left in the magazine, one in the chamber. And I told him, I said, tell them, hurry, hurry. I have 2 rounds left. And he's still got on class 3 body armor. We chased him 11.6 miles, and he pulled off to the right into the ditch with a road sign in front of it. And I put down the window of the passenger side, and I opened up the door with my left hand. Johnny pulled up where his front bumper was even with the guy's rear bumper. And I was going to step out, and I was going to use that door as a shield, and I was going to re-engage him. But before my foot even hit the ground, he accelerated. He took out the sign in front of him and went right back up on the road. And we started pursuing him before I barely got my foot in the door before he was off and running. And we started pursuing him again. This time he went about 3/4 mile farther up the road. He swerved off to the left-hand side of the road, over the top of the curve, through a fence, and out into a field about 50 yards out. And I told Johnny, I said, just get down below the dash, stay out of gunfire. And I got out, and I stood behind the hood of his truck again. And started yelling some rude obscenities, get out, and couldn't see anything. He was parked kind of away from me. I couldn't see in the vehicle, but I was just looking out into the field. And it took the police another 5 to 7 minutes by their own estimates before they finally showed up. And I was thinking, where are the police? 5 to 7 minutes is an eternity.
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing I heard was, driver, get out of the vehicle with your hands up. And I looked off to my left, and I could see the officer about 50 yards from me. He was standing behind the door to his car. In his right hand, he had a pistol. Left hand, he had a microphone. He keyed it again. He said, driver, get out of the vehicle with your hands up. And I'm going to tell your audience, if you're ever in that sort of situation, that officer wants to go home. He may not know the story. So I laid the rifle on the hood of the truck, and I started back to the back of the truck, palms out, hands out, fingers spread. Started walking back to the back of the truck, and he looked at me and made eye contact. He keyed the mic again and said, not you. And it was like, okay. And I ran back over, picked up the rifle. Johnny had been talking to dispatch, so they knew what was going on, but I didn't know they knew it. And so the officer with a pistol at 100 yards, me with 50 yards with a rifle, even with 2 rounds, I had a better tactical advantage than he did. And so I went back over and held the rifle until 4 or 5 other police cruisers came up. This time they were pulling AR-15s out of the trunks of their cars. And I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. I'm over my head. Pulled the rifle off the hood of the truck, went over and laid it on the toolbox in the back of the truck. And now I'm trying to hang on to the side of the bed of the truck because November 5th, 2017, in Sutherland Springs, Texas, it was 90 degrees. And my feet are starting to get warm on the pavement. And so I'm trying to get my feet in the shade. And I sat there maybe another 30 to 45 minutes, and the police had formed up 50 yards up the road. There was a roadblock another 200 yards, and I could see my wife's car another 200 yards up the road at the roadblock. And I decided that I was going to make a dash back to the police line. And when I started to run, they said, no, 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 wait, we'll bring up a police cruiser and bring you back here. And so they did. They brought up a police cruiser, and I used it for cover to get back to them. And they set me down on a guardrail, and then the adrenaline started leaving, and I started shaking. And I could see, like I say, no one in this world I wanted to speak to more than my own wife. And I could see the car up left, and the officer walked by, and I said, "Excuse me, can I call my wife?" He said, "Oh, sure, call your wife." And he kept walking. I said, "Can I use your phone?" He looked at me and said, "What, you don't have a phone?" I looked down. I said, "I don't even have shoes on. I left my phone at the house." He said, "Sure, use my phone." He handed the phone, and I went through a real moment with my wife where I was crying. And I said, "I think I killed a man." And again, like I say, it had almost been an hour that we'd been down there and saw no movement in the car. And she said, "Well, you did what you had to do." And I said, "But my feet are hot. Hey, can you get me some shoes?" She said, "Well, you can have my Crocs, but they won't let me down there." I looked at the officer. I said, can I go get my wife's shoes?" He said, "No, you need to stay here." I said, "But my feet are hot." He opened up the back of his police cruiser and said, "Well, you can sit in the back of my cruiser." And I'm like, "No, I'm good." I did not want to sit in the back of a police car because those doors don't open from the inside. So they kept me there for 4.5 hours. And they passed me from police car to police car, and I got diarrhea of the mouth. Right to Bear or U.S. Law Shield, they all tell you, shut up and lawyer up. I didn't do that. I should have. But they kept promising me, said, when the Texas Rangers get here, they'll take over the scene and give them your statement, and then you can go home. And all I wanted to do was go home. And so Texas Rangers did indeed show up. They took over the scene, and I gave them my statement. They said, "You can go." And I was making that long walk back, the 200 yards to my wife's car. And a lady came up behind me and said, "Mr. Willeford, I need to speak with you for a moment." And she was crying. Mascara was messed up. I said, turned around, and she said, "I had friends in that church." I said, "How bad is it?" She said, it's really bad." She said, "But if there's anything I can do, here's my card. I'm the DA of Wilson County." Boy, I snatched that card out of her fingers so fast, I'll bet it smoked. But he had shot and killed himself. He turned the pistol to his head underneath and shot himself underneath the helmet and killed himself. I truly believe he's coughing up his own blood and probably dying, but that's okay. He killed himself, and I don't have to tell anyone I killed him. He did it his own self, and I'm good with that. In the church, um, We had so many heroes, so many people that are noteworthy. It, the subtitle of the book is Faith and Heroism. Well, it has to do with the people in the church. Julie Workman, I mentioned she'd been shot through the breast. She was an emergency room nurse. And the moment the shooter left, she got up and saw a little 5-year-old girl shot in the head, and she screamed. Gunny Macias, a retired Marine, was shot 5 times in the abdomen. And as soon as the shooter left, Gunny Macias yelled out in his voice, "Hallelujah, hallelujah, even in this, praise God." And then he looked at Julie and said, "You were made for this moment. We need you." And he woke Julie up out of her panic. And she started tying tourniquets, still bleeding from her own wounds. She was tying tourniquets and saving lives, packing wounds and stuff. And then a little 7-year-old girl said, "Gunny, I'm scared." And Gunny started singing "Jesus Loves Me" with her. The first officer that was on the scene at the church, Hank Farnett, he had been buying trauma kits out of his own pocket and keeping them in his squad car, and was able to tie 4 tourniquets himself. But even more than that, he handed out those trauma kits and allowed other people to tie tourniquets and save lives. When he realized the shooter was gone, he started saving lives with his ability to tie tourniquets and the knowledge that he had gone taught himself. And out of his own pocket, he had tourniquets in his car.
What amazing! I mean, I was doing my research on this for the show, and there were some descriptions of things that we had seen in there, and I can't even picture or imagine what that could have even been like. But there's something that I left out that I think needs to be stated here. You are also a gun instructor.
I was a firearms instructor. Yes, I was a competitive shooter also.
I think that makes a huge difference in this situation. I kind of want to. Do you have anything further to add? Because I got a lot of questions for you.
Well, I will say that if you go out and you practice, you've got your concealed carry permit and you go out and practice and you shoot at flat targets, standing still, that's marksmanship, and that's good training. Is marksmanship is good training. It's not going to help you in a mass shooting. If you are not shooting and moving at the same time, looking for and running for cover, and there's a difference between cover and concealment. Cover will stop a bullet. Concealment just hides you. So you should be moving and running to cover, like I did with the pickup truck. Uh, and if you're standing still in a gunfight and shooting at someone, you're the target. You just haven't figured it out yet. So you should be
True.
training and doing what you need to do. I don't think training should be mandatory to carry a gun, but I think it should be just common sense.
Well, you know what? We don't have much of that anymore, and so that's kind of something that's been put on the wayside. What one of the things that I was as I was reading about the story, and I got to thinking, like, man, it just stimulated all these thoughts. We had a situation up here in the grocery store where a guy came in and started shooting, and I think about what would you do? I mean, I carry. I don't think here on Truth Talks we hide how we feel about the subject matter, and we're going to talk to you a little bit more with Guns of America. But uh, I'm just kind of curious as to your opinion on this. If you're standing at the front and the guy's in the back and you got a gun, is it heroism or chicken shit if you just decide to get yourself out if the cops haven't gotten there yet?
I will tell you, okay, because at the Walmart shooting in El Paso, there were 8 concealed carry permit holders at that Walmart that day. None of the 8 of them chose to confront the shooter, the murderer. But they all got their families out safe. That's honorable. But there's a certain bit of us that are wired differently. And make no mistake, I didn't want this. I didn't ask for it. But when I found out there were 8 concealed permit holders in that Walmart, they didn't do anything. I thought to myself, what's so different? Me, the best way to get my family out of that situation is tell them, hit the door, run. Don't worry about me. I'll take care of myself. You get out, you get away, you get to safety. And I'm going to go confront the guy because I am increasing their chance of survival. Because if he has to mess with me, he can't shoot one of them in the back. He's more focused on me. And if I can stop him, I save not only my family's life, but I save your family's life the same. So if you take your gun and you get out and get away, I'm not gonna say anything bad about that, you know. But if you train and to a little bit higher level and you realize your skills are probably better than 90% of the people out there. And this is something to think about. They say national average of police officers in a gunfight fire an average of 24 shots. You want to take a guess what percentage of those shots hit the target?
I know it's very small.
You want to guess?
Yeah, 1%.
National average is 17%. 17% of those shots actually hit the bad guy. Where are the rest of those shots going?
Yeah.
And that was in the back of my head. And I hit him 6 out of 6 rounds.
That's laser focus.
I didn't want to be responsible for hurting somebody else.
You know, one of the things that I'm sure that you got interrogated with all kinds of stuff, but you know, the biggest question that crosses my mind is, what am I going to have to go through if I had to do that situation and you ended up shooting someone or having even to kill the bad guy? People talk about all the incredible law stuff and legal stuff that a person has to go through. Did you experience that?
It depends on where you are. What I will tell you is if you ever think about using your gun, what I tell people, is it worth going to prison for? Is pulling your gun out worth going to prison for? Because if the consequences of you not pulling your gun aren't worth going to prison for, you probably ought to leave it holstered.
Great advice.
And that's a big statement, but the consequences of me not going over there would have meant more people died. And I was willing to go to prison for whatever. And I figured that it would work its way out and I would be released, but it turned out I didn't go to prison. They didn't even have a grand jury to discuss arresting me or charging me. They didn't even have a grand jury for that. Nothing was ever done.
God bless Texas, right?
God bless Texas.
You know, when Chad brought me this story, I was like, oh man, this is just going to be such an incredible story, because it's something that I think about quite often, especially with the world the way it is today. It's an absolute disaster, and I get pretty emotional. I get pretty charged up when this whole gun debate comes on. So I read about this guy, and he had a lot of issues. There was a lot of mental health issues. There was a lot of just bad dude. And it's not just one; they exist everywhere. I don't know. I don't ever understand why we always go straight to the gun and we never go straight to the who's behind the issue. Why you need a gun? It's just illogical to me in most all of these situations. But it's here.
This should absolutely be a wake-up call for everyone. Homeland Security and the FBI has said we are at a higher threat level than we were before 9/11. That Hamas and Hezbollah have moved across our southern border. They're saying that these terrorists had moved into our country through the southern border. And they said that an attack on religious institutes is imminent. It's not whether it will happen, but when it will happen. I would say buy a gun, carry a gun. You are your own first responder. That when it happens, when seconds count, police are minutes away. And I'm for the thin blue line. I appreciate law enforcement. And, for so many times they're coming running as fast as they can to a situation to put their life on the line, and they don't even know who you are. So it's time for you to be your own first responder. Police are second responders.
No, I absolutely agree with that. And like I said, I was really super excited to be able to talk to you today because I like to just bring on guests that have an incredible message and, reality. I like being real, and we call it Truth Talks for a reason. It's just, we put out the truth and then we let people decide what they want to do. And of course, I heard all about you, and I know you're an honorable and just truthful, well, Texan. We'll even throw that in there too. So I was excited to do this. Tell us a little bit about Gun Owners of America. Sorry.
We are the only no compromise gun advocacy group out there. If you have a pistol brace, on an AR and you're able to keep it, thank Gun Owners of America. We're the ones that got that stay for that. We fought Prop 114 in Oregon. In your state, Colorado, they were going to pass an assault weapons ban, and I signed up to speak in your house. And they said, we normally don't let somebody from out of state speak. And I said, you're using Sutherland Springs to pass an assault weapons ban. You damn well ought to speak to someone from Sutherland Springs. Sorry about the language.
No, that's good.
Ought to speak to somebody from Sutherland Springs. And so they signed me up. I waited 6.5 hours on a Zoom call. And finally, I testified. We were able to beat it by one vote in committee. It didn't even go to the full floor. One vote in committee. And that's what Gun Owners of America is good at, is putting my story out there and letting people know. The assault weapons ban in California recently got overturned. It was appealed, but it got overturned. And the judge, on page 69 of his finding, mentioned me and Sutherland Springs specifically as to why California should not have an assault weapons ban.
You know what? Good for you. I again, in preparation for this, I was thinking, I've got a lot of my buddies and everyone owns guns. And if you sit down, and you talk to them, none of us who own guns and like guns for many different purposes, none of us ever want to use them, right? And so I see the flip side of the argument where they're saying, well, if there were no guns, then none of these mass shootings would take place. Well, you're never going to get rid of all the guns. And so
2 years ago in China, two brothers went crazy in a school. They killed 31 people before they were stopped, and they were doing it with knives.
Mm-hmm.
Now London, England has surpassed New York City for the highest crime rate, the highest murder rate. They're doing it with knives. It doesn't really matter. Ever since Cain killed Abel with a rock, there's going to be good and evil. The difference is, if you put a gun, I'm an old, fat, slow, bald guy. And if I could not have been a threat to the young man that was shooting up the church, but you put a gun in my hands, and now we're equal. So you can't look at Jack Wilson at the West Freeway Church of Christ in Fort Worth, Texas. That man shot two of his friends with a shotgun, killed him, and Jack Wilson pulled out his pistol in less than 6 seconds after it started, shot him under the left eye, and stopped it. And Jack's even older than I am.
Yeah, nobody likes to talk about that. And, I have a brother who is a he's security at the church that we attend back in our hometown. And even the thought that you got to need security for a church just seems kind of overwhelming at times. But tell me just a little bit about your book. What's it in the book, or what possessed you to write the book, A Town Called Sutherland Springs: Faith and Heroism?
I guess the book was a release. When something like this happens to you, your life will never be the same. No matter how much you want to go back to innocence before it happened, it's not going to happen. And I can't explain why. And I've talked to several people now that have been involved in stuff like this, from all the way. I have friends from Santa Fe, Texas, where the school shooting took place, and their life has changed. They can't go back, even if they were not wounded or anything, they still cannot go back to the life that they had before. So my book is a little bit of a way to release. I talk about my family and the community, and growing up in Sutherland Springs. I'm fourth generation in Sutherland Springs. My great grandfather bought the property that you see behind me, 1927, and has passed it down through. And I was fortunate enough to have my great grandparents till I was in my mid 20s. And what a blessing that was. And he used to take me around Sutherland Springs delivering food baskets to struggling families when I was a young boy. And he used to play Santa Claus and deliver toys to underprivileged children in Wilson County when I was a boy. And now I do the same thing on the back of a Harley Davidson every Christmas, just before Christmas. Me and the First Baptist Church load up toys and we deliver them throughout the whole county. And I'm dressed like Santa, just like my great grandfather. There's something about it, the community, and all of that's in the book. Me growing up on a dairy, and the responsibilities and the things, and then me training my children to shoot. My kids were all distinguished experts with a pistol by the time they were 8 years old, and I made that happen. And they, even today, they carry with them everywhere they go. And those stories are in the book.
I love it. I love it. How can people find out more about Gun Owners of America?
Go to gunowners.org, gunowners.org, and you can sign up. Annual membership is only $25 a year. And we do more. People ask, what do I get for my membership? You get to know that your money's actually going to the fight. There's another organization that has a beautiful magazine. We don't do a magazine. We do newsletters and stuff, and we spend your money actually on the fight. And that's what matters. You get our emails, know when that you need to go out and go to your capital and fight certain bills or fight for certain bills. You'll get those emails. Recently, the ATF was trying to push where they were trying to do away with all private sales. And there's a time period before that gets enacted where you, as the general public, can write in and tell the ATF you don't want that to happen, or you do want that to happen, or whatever. Gun Owners of America did an email blast out and blasted our 2.5 million members and said, provided a letter that you would just sign the form letter and send in, or you could change it. We encourage you to change it, put it in your own words and stuff, sign it, send it in. We got 85,000 of our members to bombard the ATF. And more of our members wrote those letters than anybody else. Gun Owners of America is great because we have great members.
That's absolutely fantastic. I tell you what, Stephen, again, people probably throw around the word hero. I don't know how it makes you feel or whatever, but it's truly what it was. And at its finest, I sit and question myself after hearing you speak and reading your whole story. Would I have done the same? I don't know. I'd like to think I would have, but I don't know.
I can help you with that. because reality is tomorrow's going to come. And there's certain outcomes to your tomorrow. And I ask people, what does your tomorrow look like? Somebody comes murdering innocent people. What does your tomorrow look like? Your tomorrow could look like 6 of your friends carrying you in a casket, putting you over a hole in the ground. There's no guarantees in life. That could be your tomorrow if you intervene. Your tomorrow could look like standing in front of a mirror to shave your face the next morning and said you have the tools, you could have prevented or stopped this, and you did nothing. That could be your tomorrow. And there's some things that are worse than death in life. And to have to live with the fact that people were dying and you did nothing, and you had tools and skills and you did nothing. I think that's worse than dying.
Stephen Willeford, thank you so much for coming on our show. It was an absolute pleasure to get your story of your heroism, your faith, hearing about your book, hearing about Gun Owners of America. We appreciate anytime somebody comes on, gives us their time, gives us their story for somebody else to learn something that they didn't know and learn some truth. So thank you one more time for coming on our show.
Thank you. God bless.
God bless.